But first, I'm giving Defence Minister Richard Marles credit today for one important thing, telling the truth about the terrible danger Australia's in. The problem is, I'm now thinking, yes, and you're doing what? Marles was scarily honest in talking today about the new national defence strategy he released, like we won't have a defence force fit for the next war until the next decade. But China is a threat right now, he said. The danger has even got worse over the last 12 months, his words.
China has employed coercive tactics in pursuit of its strategic objectives, including forceful handling of territorial disputes and unsafe intercepts of vessels and aircraft operating in international waters and airspace in accordance with international law. Australia no longer has the luxury of a 10-year window of strategic warning time for conflict.
Marles says, we're unlikely to be invaded, but we could just be strangled. China can just block our shipping lanes.
An invasion of Australia is an unlikely prospect in any scenario, precisely because so much damage can be done to our country by an adversary without ever having to step foot on Australian soil.
Now, here's a simple example of how stupid we've been. And I don't just mean we haven't spent enough money on the right weapon for years now. You take our petrol supplies. Once Australia had 8 refineries here. Now our petrol could be cut off like that.
Today there are just 2 refineries left. Around 80% of what they refine is imported crude oil. And today around 85% of our liquid fuel needs are supplied by imported refined product, most of it from just 3 countries, Korea, Singapore and Malaysia. We are literally dependent on this sea line of communication. The rules of the road at sea are everything for us. When the rules-based order is under pressure, Australia is under pressure.
And then there's the possibility of North Korea firing its nuclear weapons, a war between China and the US, war in the Middle East right now, or this huge land war in Europe, Ukraine. The world has got massively more dangerous. So when Marles had laid it all out, naming also the China threat, naming our weaknesses, viewers would have been desperate to know, well, what are you going to do about it so we can defend ourselves like Marles said we must?
There is now one job at hand: transforming our future capability such that Australia can resist coercion and maintain our way of life in a much less certain region and world.
Now, all this is spot on as far as I can tell. I mean, we do need weapons that can reach China's ships, say, or, as Marles said, our adversary way out at sea. We need many more missiles, long-range ones, the nuclear submarines we've ordered, drones and more soldiers too. We'll probably have to hire from New Zealand and the Pacific. All that we needed, said Richard Marles. And again, you'll say, oh, well, yes, good. And spend what exactly? How much more? And then we got to it. An extra $50 billion, he said, spread over the next 10 years, mostly on more ships and missiles. But of that $50 billion, just 5 will be spent in the next 4 years, which works out to, just over $1 billion a year, $1.5 billion. But then Pinky promised massive more spending in the 6 years after. Well, I should also add that Marles outlined billions in savings with that money directed to this new weaponry. Essentially, so we'll have a bigger navy that can hit an enemy much further away. But let me put it bluntly. And remember, yes, most of the fault is with the past Liberal governments. It's this. We're told the world hasn't been this dangerous in years, but we won't have our nuclear subs for a decade. We won't have the big surface ships we need for another decade. We won't be in fighting shape for almost a decade, but we're spending less than $1.5 billion a year extra on our defence. Now, asked about this mismatch between the danger and the response, Marles was defensive.
This is the biggest commitment in terms of increasing the defence budget over the forward estimates in decades.
All true, but we probably haven't been in this much danger for decades either. So to me, it doesn't really add up. And you know how it strikes me? Richard Marles is a smart man and spoke very well today. He can see the danger, he can see what we need. But the people really running the Albanese government won't give them the money to buy it, and fast.